The headline says your Social Security check would be in danger if the U.S. defaults. All right, let's see what they have to say. Among the many dire consequences of a possible U.S. default, the fallout on Social Security has emerged as one of the most feared. Now, by the way, this is part of the media news cycle to really get you concerned because let's face it, they're not going to default. This is just part of the narrative. We saw this happen back in the Obama years. They eventually said, oh, it's going to fall off a cliff, and they extended it so the government could spend more money. President Biden is scheduled to meet with congressional leaders on Tuesday, and this article was just recently published discussing raising the debt ceiling, the statutory limit on what the government is allowed to borrow to fund its operations. The government hit the current ceiling of $31.4 trillion. Let's just take a breath. $31.4 trillion. You know how long it takes to count to a trillion? Like 30,000 years or 32,000 years. I know because I Googled it. You know what was going on 32,000 years ago? I don't know. Biden had just been born. Ice Age. Trump was running around with the other orangutans. I mean, come on. This is insane. $31.4 trillion on January 19th. And since then has taken what the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has called extraordinary measures to keep the government afloat. Yellen said last week that these measures could be exhausted soon and the U.S. could default on its debt as early as June 1st if lawmakers don't act before then to lift the borrowing limit. If the debt ceiling isn't raised, the U.S. may not have enough money to pay all of its bills on time. By the way, they should have plenty of money to pay for Social Security. The money comes in, but unfortunately, it immediately gets borrowed out. And because they're borrowing it out, they don't have the money in that account anymore. So there's enough coming in to pay everyone and have some left over, but they don't treat it that way. See, the government wouldn't be able to issue any debt and would be limited to covering its obligations and the cash flows that come in, which can vary greatly from day to day. If it misses a payment to bondholders, the government enters default. The Treasury lacks the ability to prioritize payment, Yellen said. In other words, if money is short, it would be unable to move Social Security's nearly 70 million recipients to the front of the line ahead of Wall Street bondholders or any other countless programs and contractors that get paid by the federal government. While Social Security is funded in large part through a dedicated payroll tax, I got FICA FUTA, that flows into its trust fund. The trust fund invests in government securities. What it means is government securities are treasury bills and treasury bonds and treasury notes, which means the government immediately borrows it out. You've seen that show Dumb and Dumber, right? And Dumb and Dumber, where they have all the IOUs. Hey, that's a Lamborghini. You might want to hold on to that one. Yeah, Dumb and Dumber, the government is taking the money in government securities. They say invest in government securities. No. It's being borrowed by the government, even though it's dedicated for Social Security. That makes Social Security a government bondholder, and like other bondholders, it can go unpaid in the event of a default. What might transpire is in the worst-case scenario, if anyone's educated guess, it says, Kathleen Romig, that's what she says, Director of Social Security and Disability Policy at the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities, there's no roadmap for default because the idea is not to default. But again, we're spending money we don't have, and even if we tax people at 100%, we still wouldn't have enough money to pay everything off. So we've got addicted to spending and not using value as our key indicator, but instead just using entitlement. And I get it. We've had difficult situations and there's people in desperate times. And I would love to have programs that help kids and that help disabled people. But when all of a sudden the government starts spending in a way that isn't effective or efficient or with that accountability and goes way beyond, because $31.5 trillion is a huge amount of money. No wonder they're talking about not extending it. So, if the government doesn't have money to pay in full, it could hold off paying anything until the coffers refill rather than issuing a partial refund, she says. The way Social Security recipients can be affected may come down to timing. That's because Social Security payments are delivered on a staggered schedule depending on what day the recipient is born. Look, I've been born in 78. I'm a ways away from Social Security. I just don't plan on it being there. I get people who are on Social Security, and that was part of their program. But part of the issue is it came from the industrial age when people died really early in their 60s. But now we're prolonging life with all this medication and also with technology. We understand how to take better care of ourselves. And for some people, that's less stress. Or we've seen that the wealthier people add 5 years to their life because of their access to care, the type of food that they can eat, the type of support they can have. And they're not just grinding to, make ends meet, which can be extraordinarily stressful. So there's a problem with the system. Maybe part of it is we have to retire the notion of retiring for 30, 40, or 50 years, right? Maybe it's about finding a way to add value and utilize and leverage technology and AI so that we're not in the industrial age of just exhausting ourselves through manual labor. So look, those who were born on the 1st through the 10th of the month get their checks on the second Wednesday of the month, for example. Even a small delay in benefits would have a devastating impact on beneficiaries who rely on Social Security for much of their income, says Nancy Altman, president of Social Security Works, a nonprofit organization working to expand the program. See, expanding the program on whose dollar, on whose labor? That's the question. And why is it that people want to retire so early? It's because we have to invest back in ourselves and our skill sets and stop trading who we are for work that we hate. That's exhausting. It drains our energy. Again, I know there's certain people that are already there. And I grew up in a family that was, entrenched in the industrial age as coal miners. But I don't want to retire because I actually love what I do. And I get not a lot of people get to have that path. But what if we invested more time to figure out our career? What if we invested more money in ourselves? And what if we relied less on institutions that are borrowing deeply and that we are absolutely beholden to them if they make these major mistakes, which I don't think anyone, whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, would disagree that the government has done a pretty atrocious job with their budgeting, with their spending, and with their debt overall. So this says 12% of men and 15% of women rely on Social Security for 90% or more of their income, according to the Social Security Administration. That's pretty big. Not everyone fears that beneficiaries will be hurt. I don't think it's going to happen, says Andrew Biggs, and I'm kind of in the same place as Andrew. He's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Lawmakers will likely avert catastrophe by raising the debt ceiling. Yep, I agree, Biggs. But even if they fail, he said, they could still take measures after the fact, for example, passing a law to protect Social Security beneficiaries. This is one of the problems with Social Security. There's no longer value being added. There's not money there for it. And yet we created entitlements and people are like, I deserve this. Well, guess what? If there's not money there, I'm sorry, we've got to start thinking a little bit differently. We should help each other out. We should invest in each other. We should invest in education. We should help create opportunity. There's great purpose to have a government to protect our life, our liberty, and to create justice. But when we overstep and we get so many jobs that nobody sees or nobody understands and so much spending because it sounds good politically that doesn't actually add enough value to the economy, then we start to be on the precipice of what we're facing now. $31.5 trillion, but not enough people that are adding enough value to compensate for that spending. We know part of that comes from, a lot of the government corruption and, there's, I don't know how many articles and how many movies have been based upon how many different boardroom deals or backroom deals or in order to get favor from lobbyists or in order to get funding for campaigns. And unfortunately, what we've found is rather than looking at the individual person and what is going to create conditions to allow them to succeed, we've made these promises that we can't keep that require too much borrowing. So what are we going to do about Social Security? Well, let's first say it's not going to go away. This debt ceiling will be raised and you're going to be fine. Part of my advice is take it as early as you can get it because you don't know how long it's going to be under the same conditions it is now. Trying to expand it when we have 31.4, 31.5 trillion of debt seems irresponsible. Why not find ways that people could prolong the enjoyment of their careers and invest in that, take more time off along the way so they're not exhausted and have to retire completely because 30 years of retirement is taxing on the system. All right, I've spoke my piece. You don't need to worry about it going away, but you do need to start worrying about this overspending and what that means to future generations and to bad habits that continue to put us in this stalemate that we eventually overcome and we go, let's just spend more money. It's what we have to do, and everybody accepts it as the right thing to do, but ultimately maybe the right reasons, but the wrong system. All right, if you like this video and you want to find out more, and as I help you discern truth from falsehood with articles, give you more perspective behind what's being said, and ultimately find options of what you could do, invest in yourself, discover your investor DNA so you know how to become a better investor, plug your financial leaks so you keep more of what you make, create your own financial independence so your assets create enough cash flow to cover your expenses and you're not reliant upon Social Security, and pay yourself first by automatically setting money aside, build up enough liquidity for 6 months. And if those kind of ideas sound good, we'll go ahead and explore more videos that we have throughout this entire, YouTube channel. All right, this is Garrett Gunderson, and if you like this and you actually like to read, go to garrettgunderson.com/musings, where I go deeper into the concepts of how to live a richer life, how to manage your money properly, how to build or grow a business, how to overcome mistakes or things that set back, and ultimately how to design a life you love. Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And if you're enjoying these videos, well, there's good news. More where that came from. So go ahead and click through and watch the next video now.